Economy, youth development, jobs, housing and boosting small businesses. These are some of the burning issues South Africans want President Jacob Zuma to address in his State of the Nation tonight. The Congress of the South African Trade Unions, Cosatu, says it expects the President to make a commitment that government will tackle underlying problems in the mining industry when he delivers his State of the Nation address on Tuesday. Now, the President will deliver his speech against the backdrop of the ratings agency Fitch, who changed South Africa's outlook from stable to negative, citing ongoing mass strike action on the Platinum Belt and constrained electricity supply as factors in its revision. Meanwhile, Public Enterprises Minister Lynne said that electricity remains one of the critical building blocks for economic growth and that Eskom continues to face challenges in the absence of significant new capacity being brought online. Now, to take this discussion forward, we are joined in studio by Professor Raymond Parsons. He's a professor in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at the Northwest University. Professor, good morning and welcome to AM News.
Good morning, Elvis.
State of the Nation tonight. That is the big one. What do we expect?
Absolutely. And I think you have already ticked all the boxes that the nation wants to see addressed this evening. But we must just go back for a minute. And if we look at the last of the State of the Nation addresses in February, when President Zuma looked back, rightly so, he said, I have a good story to tell for the country, and looked back over the past 20 years, and then said, I'm going to leave the future and what I want to do about it to after the election. And we're there now. What do we need to do if we want an economy which is going to be stronger, bigger, and better than it is at the moment? And as you have rightly indicated, there are a number of red lights flashing. We know what they are. I think one of the most important messages that needs to come out of the State of the Nation address today, as far as making our economy the actual centerpiece of it, is action and implementation. We know the problems. How many more times are we going to tick the boxes? We know what they are. What we need now is a view of the future. We know that the President is now into his second and last term. He can show leadership and say, I'm going to take some tough decisions. I expect the private sector to also step up to the plate, but we are going to move forward. We're going to create certainty over the next few years, because in effect, this is the first State of the Nation address of the new Parliament. So it has to set a pattern. And I think from the private sector point of view, they're looking for certainty and predictability. What will be the framework? Well, obviously, it's the National Development Plan. Within that plan, we must have an implementation plan, which will involve the private sector and government to move this economy forward and to address these issues and to show delivery. I think that's really the basic message that the country, let alone the business community, wants out of the State of the Nation address.
Now, you cited the National Development Plan. Government decided that as the panacea, probably, to the problems of South Africa. Do you foresee that as the solvent of all our economic problems in the country and the sluggish economy?
I wouldn't call the National Development Plan a panacea. It's a very serious plan which looks to 2030 and says, where do we want this country to be by 2030? But it also says, if we want to fix the future, we've got to start now. We've got to start tonight, in fact. And it is a framework within which there's got to be implementation in the field of infrastructure, in the field of education, youth unemployment, to which you have referred earlier. That's got to be at the top of the list. I'd like to see, especially now that we have a ministry for small business, to add to the National Development Plan's targets, not just those 11 million jobs which we hope to create by 2030, but to say, because we're looking to entrepreneurship, whether it's the big investor or the youth entrepreneur, to move this economy forward, we're going to add another target, 1 million enterprises, new enterprises, within the next, say, decade or so. Because we know that on average, every enterprise in this country, on average, it creates about 10 jobs. So if you can create another 1 million enterprises, you're almost home and dry. That's part of the big goal that we've got to mobilize the country. And I think tonight's speech really has to mobilize us behind those goals, make it work. We must translate that vision into reality, and we don't want any more talk shops.
Now, ratings agency Fitch changed South Africa's outlook from stable to negative, citing ongoing mass strikes, action on the Platinum Belt, as well as our emergency constrained electricity supply, I might call it. Will this have a negative impact on our economy?
Well, obviously, all they've done actually is to confirm what we know, but it's good to know that there are these independent assessments that reaffirm the urgency of what we need to address and some of the issues that have been raised. The issue of the strike in Northwest, this whole platinum story of indeed labour relations and the conflict between business, government and labour over what the outcome should be. The security of supply of our energy and electricity. Really, we really have to send out a more positive message. I've made the point that one of the contributory factors could be perhaps daylight saving. I was hoping perhaps that the President this evening might announce an investigation into daylight saving, but I don't think he will. But we've got to understand we've got to save energy, save electricity, and we've got to give the assurance that we're going to run that whole part of our economy a lot better in terms of the security of supply of electricity, because quite clearly it's a serious inhibiting factor which the credit agencies have also picked up, and they're saying to us, we are sending you a signal, a wake-up call, if you still need one, that you face some urgent challenges, and we're putting you on notice. We're giving you time to turn certain things around. The question is now, will we use this time wisely?
Now, you talk about daylight savings. Now, Medupi and Kusile power plants are not online as yet. Eskom is battling to keep our lights on. Do you foresee, and you've called for daylight saving before, but what is the possibility of that being investigated and to ensure that maybe there's an alternative for Eskom to fall back onto?
Well, I think the important point here is we must accept that for the next 2 or 3 years, the whole system's going to be stressed, partly because of the delays and so forth. So quite clearly that's a big red flag that we have. It's also clear from the recent announcements, you will know that, it's between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the evening. That's a peak hour. So all I've been saying is, well, look, one of the elements that could contribute to a smoothing out of the use could be to have a look at our daily saving, to have a look at the daylight saving. If we shifted it by an hour, would it make a difference? Would it just help to keep the lights on? And there are other things we have to do. But I think the important point is we've got to understand that what the credit rating agencies are saying is to flash a very serious warning that unless we can give more certainty in the field of security of supply of electricity, we are not going to get an economy that is going to perform as we would like it, to create the jobs, to grow, and to get the level of investment that we want.
Some analysts has called it a wake-up call, the revisions. But how close are we to junk status here, Professor?
I think we've got time. I think what they're saying is you've got time. But it's not unlimited, and they'll be looking at the next budget. They'll be looking at what decisions are taken by the Cabinet. They'll be looking at the State of the Nation address tonight. That will also send out some very important signals as to the framework within which there will be implementation. We will see certain decisions being taken, and that we will begin to implement our National Development Plan in a serious and tangible way that will give people hope and certainty about the future.
But implementing that National Development Plan, surely there must be some challenges. What are some of those challenges there?
Well, the challenges really is to take some of the tough decisions that have to be taken, and we mustn't think that this is a garden walk. I think to restructure an economy requires some tough decisions, especially in the field of infrastructure. In fact, the funds are there. We've simply got to get these projects off the ground. And if we've got to mobilize those wicked capitalists, you don't have to love them, use them. Help you get the job done. That's tough. It's, I think has to be done. I think from the private sector point of view, there are also some things that the private sector can do without having to ask the government. It must step up to the plate. But ultimately, the government is the custodian of the National Development Plan. So it must, together with the leadership of other stakeholders, including business and labour, translate what the commitment is, and to align what has been said will be the acceptance of the National Development Plan within those existing policies. There are already some decisions which cannot be reconciled with with the NDP. So we have to revisit them and bring them in line, and future policies have to be also tested against that, so that, for example, the business community and investors have the certainty and the predictability which they want from the future.
As the author of Zumanomics, did you ever foresee a Zumanomic 2 to come in the second term?
Well, I'm hoping that my book, in fact, was, in fact, something of a crystal ball, because much of what I've said there is now, in fact, coming to pass. It's part of the dynamic of the debate. But now the debate has to be translated into reality. And the big challenge which I posed in the book, and which I think is now that we've got this election out of the way, is to implement what we have said we will do. Even if it's unpopular, I also think that what political history tells you is that if you do have to do unpopular things because they're right, do them early in your next term of office. Don't wait to the end, so that we can see the advantages of the right decisions being taken.
In 30 seconds, wrapping up.
What I would hope is that if we were to have this discussion tomorrow, after the State of the Nation address, that we will be more hopeful and more certain about the future, and that we will all cooperate to help make it happen.
Professor Parsons, as always, thank you so much for joining us here on AM News.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Parsons, Professor in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at the Northwest University.